gonna make it, just keep chasing your dream. No matter how hard it seems, we gotta keep working a little bit longer. Every day getting a little bit stronger.
Welcome to Dream Chaser Radio.
Welcome to the world famous Dream Chaser Show, and today we have a special guest. I want to welcome to the show my man, Mr. Wes Smith. Wes is a 32-year-old entrepreneur from Atlanta who was sent to prison at age 19, spent 10 years behind bars, and since being released 3.5 years ago, his businesses have grossed over $2 million. Today, Wes is going to share his story with us. So I want to welcome to the show Mr. Wes Smith. Wes, can you hear me?
Thanks, Will. I'm here.
Appreciate you coming on the show, man. After meeting you, I was extremely impressed with your story and some of the things you've been able to accomplish since getting out of prison 3.5 years ago. And I think your story just goes to show that if you have a willingness to set some goals and do what it takes to go after them, you can make anything happen. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, what you've accomplished, and how you were able to do it.
Well, I'm 32, as you said. I grew up in the Stone Mountain area, it's the suburbs of Atlanta. I grew up in a, average, middle-class American home. Went to the Parkview High School and to that school system. They had a pretty good football team. It was just a good time, growing up. Had a pretty normal childhood. I do remember as I began to get kind of preteen and then teenage years, my brother, who was 4 years older, and then my sister, who was 2 years older, they both kind of started getting into trouble and started going to parties and things like that. So I naturally wanted to follow suit and model my older brother and sister that I really loved. And so I kind of fell just right along and with them. And what that led to was, of course, starting to use drugs and alcohol and just marijuana, things like that to start with. But then, of course, other things, pills and just stuff that some high schoolers get into, and even cocaine. And at an early age, even at 14, 15 years of age, I started, using my entrepreneurial spirit, but for the wrong things. And so I began to get into drug dealing and things like that. And looking back, it's just really, I look at some of the things I did, and I have to wonder just, what was I thinking? It was nothing for, me to have a pound or 2 pounds of weed under my bed with a quadruple beam or a couple 8 balls of cocaine or something like that. That just ridiculous stuff that a 15 or 16, even 17-year-old kid should not be doing. And what ultimately that led to is me ruining my high school years. And I joke around sometimes. I'll tell people that 10th grade was the best 3 years of my life because I was literally in 10th grade 3 years in a row because I kept quitting and failing and getting kicked out. And but when I turned 18, immediately I just quit school. I was just fed up, really with myself. Not so much as the frustration I thought I perceived from the school system, but just myself. And so I quit school, and it wasn't but about 3 weeks after I had quit school that I really just, my life kind of just exploded. It just fell apart. I had just dismantled it, and the final piece just came undone. And what had happened was I was dating a girl. I'd been dating her off and on, and for 2 or 3 years, and we thought that she just had this horrible home life. That was bad, but it wasn't nearly as bad as we perceived. And so our solution was to get her out of that home situation. And the way we were going to do that was to rob a couple stores. At that time, I wasn't involved in any drug dealing or anything of that nature. And so I had a couple of guns, and I'll take responsibility for the thought that let's go rob a store. And that's what we did. And we got away with a first robbery, and it was in the Cobb County area. Looking back, I really am truly ashamed of what I did. And I paid my debt for that, in full. And but at that time, I didn't see it as that. I just saw it as a boost. I could do whatever I wanted. If I wanted something, I would just take it. And I just was bound by greed at that point and consumed. And so just 3 days later, we went and committed another armed robbery on December 30th, 1997. I was 18 years old. And she was just a few years younger than me. And this time, things turned out really bad. There was a customer who was down from Montana. He was in the Cobb County area visiting family. He ran out of the store to get a .45. I ran out after him, jumped in our car where my girlfriend, was in the driver's seat, and we took off. And he chased us down Johnson Ferry Road about 100 miles an hour. And just to tell everything and be authentic, I hung out the window. I shot at this guy, the civilian, 6 times. Thank God I didn't hit him or his vehicle. And but he swerved off the road, and he had pulled over another vehicle and flagged someone down. I got a cell phone and called the police, and at the same time my girlfriend had totaled the car out and into a neighborhood, and it was just a matter of 30 seconds before 10 cop cars were around us, and we were busted. And the detective who arrived, he knew right away that we were the same, team that had done this robbery just a few days before. It was the same MO, and we were far from professional criminals. And so what happened is it just began this chapter in my life where at that point I didn't realize what I was facing, but over the next year it really just got even worse. I did get out on bond after 6 weeks for about a year, and then in November of 1998 I went to court, and the DA, put the plea on the table of what they were offering. And it was a 20-year sentence with a minimum 10 years to serve, and there was no second plea because in the state of Georgia, with what they have, it's called the 7 deadly sins, and armed robbery is one of those 7 deadly sins that is classified on the Georgia Code. It's a minimum mandatory sentence, which is just no parole. So whatever you get, you have to do. So if you get 10, you got to do 10. If you get 15, you got to do 15. And the least they could give you was 10, so they gave me the break, and I was given a 20, served 10. And at 19 years of age, I was sent to prison. And I was sent to a prison that's in Jackson, Georgia, and it's where they house, death row, high max. Brian Nichols, the guy that shot the judge, and the security guards at the courthouse, 4 or 5 years ago, he's housed there in high max. And so it's just a bad environment. You're just basically locked in a cell for, most of the day, 23 hours a day, getting let out for a little recreation or to eat. And you're locked in a cell with another inmate, and that's where they keep you for 2 or 3 months while they do diagnostics on you to determine your IQ and what facility you would best be suited for. So after a couple months, they shipped me from that prison to Augusta, and I stayed at the prison out there for 3 years. Now, while I was at Augusta, I really began to turn my life around. Really quickly, early on, once I got sobered up in the system, I just really kind of came back to myself. I was still young. I was just a teenager. I was 19. And I recognized that I needed to educate myself if I was ever going to make anything in my life and get out of this place one day and not come back, that education was going to be key. Now, I'm still just a teenager, so that's all I know. I'm thinking just get a college degree. So I began to work on a college degree in psychology, and I even began to work with troubled youth that they would bring in through the probation system. And that was something for me that gave me purpose and while I was incarcerated. And but to make that story short, what happened is after 3 years, there was an incident involving some other inmates in the dorm where I was staying, and the warden and one of the sergeants had called me up to the warden's office to ask me what was going on. And in that culture, you just don't do that. You don't tell a warden or sergeants what other inmates are doing, especially if it's something they're not supposed to be doing, because you run the risk of getting beat or stabbed or even killed. And so I knew that I couldn't tell these people what they wanted to know. And I also knew what that meant, that I was fixing to, face some pretty harsh consequences myself. And what ended up happening is they said, well, we're gonna put you in solitary. And so they took me down to the hole, as it's called, which is about a 4x8 room, concrete walls. You got a metal bed, you got a metal sink, and a metal toilet. And that's where they put me in there. And I didn't know when I was going to get out. I didn't have anything but the food they give me a couple of times a day. And that's where I sat and just contemplated, what is going on here. And so I found myself in the hole in solitary confinement. And, I mean, to be honest, that was probably the toughest experience in my life up to this point, was that experience. I had no idea how long I'd be there, if it was a few hours or it'd be a few days or a few weeks or even months. And so the first couple of days, it was really took a toll on my body. I could not eat. I couldn't focus. Every time I try to eat, I get sick to my stomach, and so I began to lose weight with even just a couple of days because I couldn't eat anything. And ultimately what happened is they left me in there for 18 days, and they opened the door at 3 a.m. They pulled me out of there, and I was, about 15 pounds lighter. And they put me in shackles, and they put me on a bus, and they sent me 3 hours south of Augusta and of Atlanta to a camp down in Dodge, Telfair County. And it was the smallest prison in the state of Georgia. They've shut it down since then, but it was an old 1950s elementary school that had been converted into a prison that housed 250 inmates. There was no cell blocks. They had the classrooms. The classrooms were actually dorms, and there was 10 bunk beds in there, so you shared this classroom/dorm with 19 other inmates. And so that's where I lived for the next 6.5 years. Until I finished my sentence up. And I had no idea how long I'd be there. I thought surely something would happen. I would get out after 4 or 5 years. I had, parents that had money, and that give me a lawyer of some sort. But nothing would ever budge. And I had no idea at that point. So when I got down to this camp called Milan, down in Telfair/Dodge County, right on the border of this county. I had lost my college privileges, but the warden there would not let me pursue my college degree because it required VHS tapes that they were using at that time. And I was just really furious. I could not understand why the warden would not let me do that. But looking back, I really see that as a huge blessing in my life because what that did is it prompted me just with the drive that I had to educate myself to go to the next best place, which was the library. So I found myself in this small prison library with a bunch of old westerns and, fluff romance books and stuff like that. But they had a self-help section. So I found myself over there looking for some type of business book or something. And I found a book that I had heard of, but I had never read. And I saw it on the shelf. And it's called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. But this is the ironic thing. It didn't say Think and Grow Rich on the cover. It said Piense y hágase rico, which means this book was written in Spanish. So I found this book that I had heard of, but it was written in Spanish. But I had learned to speak Spanish in prison, knowing that was something I could use when I got out. And I would just look for things that I could find to help me. And so I learned to speak Spanish the first year or two in. And so I could read and write Spanish, and I could, read a book, a novel or so. So I read this Think and Grow Rich copy in Spanish, and the book had not even been checked out in 8 years. Now, maybe that was because it was in Spanish, but there were still, a lot of Hispanics in the system at that time, still are. But I just found that astounding that no one would read that book. And that book is probably the key book for my success, because when I read that book, it prompted me. And after that, I found another education course book on the 17 Principles of Success by Napoleon Hill. And I read that book daily for maybe 6 months. I found a tape series by Napoleon Hill for some old broadcast recordings. And I just began to devour this stuff by Napoleon Hill and learn about, mastermind alliances and learn about having a definite purpose for your life and having a burning desire. And I'd learned to develop all that behind bars, never having even stepped foot in the real world as an adult yet. And so that's what I really pursued for the next, 7 years of my incarceration until I got out, was just personal development. And I had, my grandparents would send me a book or two on Robert Kiyosaki or Robert Allen or, people like that just had done amazing things in real estate or in stock investments. And so I began to just read about these people. I told myself that I could do this. And I wrote maybe 10 or 15 business plans for different business opportunities I thought I could start when I got out. But I always resorted back to a construction idea. I wasn't very complex in terms of business. I had no experience, and so I thought, well, surely I could get into construction. I'd even met a lay minister that had come in with a giant ministry that was traveling the nation. And after the event was kind of over, well, a lot of the inmates wanted to leave and go back to the dorm because smoke cigarettes mainly, because if you left, you couldn't come back in. And I didn't smoke anymore at that point. I'd quit pretty early on in my prison sentence. But anyhow, so I wanted to talk to Bill because he was an entrepreneur, and he had owned some Alltel stores that he was selling off, and he was in contracting at this point. The roofing was really booming. He said he was doing 2 a day for Home Depot, making about $500 a job. So I did the math pretty quickly. It was like $5,000 a week gross. So I thought, that's pretty good money. And I'd never even really thought about making money like that as a teenager. I'd made $300 a week working a teenage job. But I began to think bigger, and so I was ready, to try something when I came home. And of course, just went through the tedious monotony of, prison life, just same thing every day, but still steadily took positive steps forward every day. I would continue to learn, continue to educate myself, get better at Spanish, learn instruments, learn how to talk to the inmates. What do they do, and what type of skills do they have, or had they ever started a business, and did they have any experience in real estate or stock investments or anything of that nature? So I was just constantly trying to learn from the around me to get prepared. And as it was getting closer and closer to my release date, I began to really just get in action. Things, have I learned enough? Have I done enough? I mean, am I going to be okay when I get out? And I didn't fear that I was going to fail. I had a good family structure to go home to. My parents were willing to let me stay at their house, when I came home and get on my feet. And so the day finally came, and December 17, 2008, and I had done 10 years. I wasn't even allowed to go to a halfway house because of the charge that I had. And just, again, written into the system, you have to serve every day. Going to a halfway house would be lessening your sentence, and they just did not allow it by law. So I walked out of the gates with $35 to my name. That was the check that they gave you. And I went home and just kind of stayed around the house and just spent time with my family the first couple of weeks. I got to catch up with everyone I hadn't seen in years, and great-grandmother and the grandparents and cousins and everyone. And so then just getting acclimated and, go shopping for some clothes, go to the grocery store and get a cell phone, a little simple stuff like that. And none of that stuff intimidated me. It was pretty cool being back home, of course, seeing all the cars, how they had changed, even cell phones, how much they had changed in 10 years, and the internet. So it was really cool just getting back into the swing of things. And I was always up for the challenge. I didn't feel like I was overwhelmed at all. And within a 2-week period, I just felt like I hadn't really skipped a beat. I just wasn't employed, and I wasn't making any money. And so I began to put my plan into action. I was looking for a job somewhat, but I knew I wanted to start a business in my part-time, and I ultimately never even found a job. I just started a business. I would clean my parents' house for $100 and then take the money and go buy a business license or go put a down payment on my insurance and things like that. Then I would put a website together and, through a template system, things like that, and began to just take some steps forward to get a structure together, and then started receiving leads from an internet service and went out and just tried my hand at sales, and I was, horrible when I look back at it, but I didn't quit. I learned what I did wrong, and I got better, and I began to sell some jobs. At the same time is when I got back in touch with Bill, the contractor. I Googled his name, was able to find his company, went and took him out to lunch, and I'm starting my company. Just as you started yours years ago, and I want to learn from you, and if I could just pick your brain over lunch, I would be most appreciative. So he was glad that I was out, and I called him, and he wanted to hear how I was doing. So I went and took him to lunch, and at the end of lunch, he was so impressed with me, he gave me the opportunity to work for his company to sell roofs for him, which was a positive because my company was so new, I could never sell roofs. No one would trust me or my company, and I didn't have any experience. But his company had been in business for 10 years. So Bill said, I'll pay you $500 a day. Diagram. So I began to sell some roofs for him. Just for about 6 months, had learned enough, and I had my own insurance, and I had my own crews at that point. I had found that I spoke Spanish, so it wasn't that hard. But I just began to get out on my own, and I began to sell my own jobs where I would make all of the profit and not just 40%. And so then I was really making some money. So just 6 months out of prison, I was making $1,500, $2,000 a week, easy, just doing one roof, a week. And but then I began even to put ads down on Craigslist, and I had roofing crews that were available, so other companies would call me, and they would sub jobs to me, and I got to where I was doing 20, 30 roofs a month easy at the end of the year. And I might only been making a third of what I would make, but I would have 2 jobs going on in one day and make up for that. And so I began to make some good money. Learned some hard lessons, got ripped off a couple of times, and but I bounced back, and it's just money. I mean, if it's 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000, you can make it back, and never gave up, didn't quit. And that paid off. At the end of the first year, I actually had just through a cold call driving down the highway, saw an office building with a sign. I called the number, the owner answered, told him we were doing free inspections, and I pulled in a $15,000 roof job. And but the cool thing was the guy was a painting contractor, and he would get roofing leads sometimes, and he would send them to me. So the guy over the next couple of years probably sent me 30 or 40 roofs that I did just off that one cold call, from contacting the guy. Through another contact that I had met off Craigslist, just doing sub jobs I mentioned earlier, and the guy called me and he had a falling out with his partner, and there was a huge 6-figure job on the line, and he asked me if I wanted it, and I told him sure I want the job, and I went out there, and actually I sent one of my workers out there. One of my good friends was working for me, and he went and took a look at the job. It was up in Tennessee, so I didn't even drive out there, so I said, Colby, go up there and take a look at the job, and let's see some times. He called me and he said it's a Marriott, it's a residence in Marriott, and it's 500 squares, which is probably 15 or 20 houses easy. And so I said, man, so I crunched the numbers real quick, and I said, we can do the job for $100,000. And so my consultant, of course, he kind of laughed, and he said, oh, no. And I thought he wanted less. So I meant we were going to make even less money. And I'm thinking, man, he's really cutting us out here. And he said the number is $182,000. That's what we're going to submit the bid at. And so I knew there was, $20,000, $25,000 profit potentially in the job. But now there's all this extra money just there, just profit. And so I just said, you got to be kidding me. So we submitted the bid, and I was on vacation with my family in Florida, and Colby called me, and he said, what are you doing next week? And I said, I don't know. What are we doing? What are you doing? He said, well, how'd you like to make $182,000? And I said, heck yeah. And he called to give me the news that we had won the job. And he said, we need to get our stuff together. Now, it wasn't easy. I had no credit. I didn't even have the money at that point to pay for the dumpsters up front that we would need. And I finally did borrow the money from a family member for the dumpsters, and we took the contract to a supplier. They gave us a $50,000 line of credit, and we did the job, and we got paid 6 weeks later, and we were just stretched thin to the max. And at that point, I had $6 in my checking account when I went to the bank. One of my business account was negative a couple $100, and my dad loaned me a couple $100 to put in my account until this check would clear. And I remember I was in an alumni meeting with my grandfather He ran the Georgia Baptist Hospital for years in Atlanta, and so we were there, and I got a text message that the check had arrived at the office in Tennessee. And so I texted Colby because I couldn't call. I'm in a meeting. It's a recognition ceremony for people, nurses, and my grandfather and things. So I texted Colby and I said, get in touch with Rob, tell him to go to the office now, get the check, and take it to the bank. And I'm already thinking it's going to take 2 weeks to clear for just a large check like this. So Rob rushes off, gets the check, and he texts back the check is a Bank of America check, which meant that the check would clear overnight, not take 10 or 14 days. And he put the check in there. And I remember when I went to the ATM after the ceremony to put the money in there, my dad was letting me borrow to bring my account back positive, and I had $6 in my account, and my other account was negative, and then I was able to see this check that's pending. It was a $182,000 check pending, and I woke up the next morning and it was there in my account. I remember taking a picture of it with my cell phone and thinking, man, this is really happening. And we paid the bills, and we made $92,000 profit off the job, and it was all said and done. And I was the owner of the company, so most of it was mine. And it was just, that was a really good feeling that enabled me to pay for my wedding. I've been home just under 2 years and paid for my wedding, basically just cash, paid for everything. It was an incredible wedding at an incredible venue. We rented a 1956 Bentley for our wedding, and it was unbelievable. And so just from there, things continued to grow. We did get some huge contracts with a large national chain that now sends us contract jobs on a weekly basis. We get, 3 or 4 or 5 or sometimes more jobs a week from them. And that's pretty steady in residual income, and we sell jobs off the internet, and just things continue to get bigger and bigger, and then just to really lead me to where I found my purpose. I was doing some work for some family members of mine. They're involved in a networking business, and they shared just another way to make money. When I took a look at it, I took a look at the culture and how these people live their life, the freedom they had, and how some of the people are my age and were already making $500,000, $600,000 a year. That was their take-home pay. I thought, if they can do this, I can do this, and jumped in. And so my wife and I are now committed to building our networking business, and things are taking off, and we know in the next 3 or 4 years that we're going to have that income that's just going to give us ultimate complete freedom in our life to pursue our dreams and our passion. And then those dreams are shared by my wife and I, Jillian, and we want to ultimately buy several hundred acres of land. We want to build a camp. We want to dedicate our summers to working with youth in a setting where we can teach them how to live powerfully and how to go out into the world and accomplish their dreams. And just do everything that they set out to do, and just have a purpose and have some meaning. And so I know without a shadow of a doubt that is going to happen. I know I have the vehicle that's going to make that happen, and I'm just really, really excited. And as I look back at the 3.5 years I've been home, I know I'm just getting started in life. I know there's still so much more. I'm only 32, and I just want to make the most of my life. I want to just live and have purpose. But it is really amazing. I do share numbers with people. I'm not ashamed of that. It's nothing that I hide. But I grossed $100,000 the first year with my company, and the second year we grossed $800,000. The third year we grossed $600,000, and this year we're probably going to be right back up at $700,000 or $800,000. And just huge jobs that are just falling out of the sky into our laps. We'll turn around and we'll make $5,000 in a day cash, and it's just unbelievable these things that happen. And sometimes people will think, you got a horseshoe stuck to your head or written in the stars. And it's just meant for you. And it's really not. It's not. It's just, I was in prison for 10 years, and in spite of all that, while I was there, I stuck out like a sore thumb because I chose to stick out. I chose to have a different mentality and philosophy than the majority of the inmates that are there, and that's why the recidivism rate is 86% return within 3 years, because they never changed their philosophies in life. They never changed their mentality, and that's what wrecks their entire life. Whereas I began to develop my philosophies from day one that I would be a winner, that I would not be a victim, that even when every door got shut in my face, I knew there was a purpose, and I just had more time to prepare. And that's how I looked at things. When I walked out the door, I continued, with that philosophy. I started with nothing. I started with $35 and parlayed that into just the incredible lifestyle that I have today. My wife and I were talking on Sunday afternoon. We were just like, we just have it so good at our age. She's 28, I'm 32, and we drive nice cars. We take 4 or 5 vacations a year. We have a really nice home. We just live in an incredible lifestyle. And anybody can have that. Anybody who wants it can have it. There are things that you have to possess, but even if you don't possess them at this time, you can learn. But definitely, it all comes back down to Napoleon Hill, that book that I found, Think and Grow Rich. That's where it starts. You read that book, you'll get a hold of something. You get a dream that would drive you. You get experience. I know that from giants that I've seen in business that have done, even far bigger things than I've done. And it comes down to having that fire in your belly that you're going to make something happen. You don't care what other people think, that you're going to show them with your actions, and you can have anything you want in life. I mean, it just simply comes down to that. And we live in America. This is one of the wealthiest nation in the world in terms of our lifestyles and how even our people on welfare, what they have compared to people in India and Africa. We're just wealthy people, and most of us should be ashamed of ourselves for not living our lives the way we were created to live, which is powerfully and making an impact all around us in the world. And we're just big people. We're created to be giants, and as the older we get, we just start playing small. We just get closed-minded, and we just get jaded, and that's just not the way we were made to be. And I will not live my life like that, and I will surround myself with people who don't have that mentality, and that's just another key to the success that my wife and I have.
Wow, Wes, that's an amazing story, man. I want to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
Going back, you go to prison. What is your mindset when the judge says, basically, we're going to give you 20 years?
I knew it was coming because it was November of 1998, and I was still out on bond, and the DA gave me the plea, this 20 years served 10, and that's when I knew. So I had time to decide if I wanted to take that plea or if I want to risk going to trial and try to say I didn't do it when I did do it. And so that thought wasn't entering my mind. So, but when the DA initially put the offer on the table, my lawyer came back to me and said the DA's offering a 20, do 10. It really knocked the wind out of me. I was just crushed. I mean, I remember just instantly just falling apart. I was real emotional as my mother was in there. It was just me and her. And, I just wished I knew it. And I just do. I was like, well, I'm going away for a long, long time. I don't even know how I'm going to do this. I had no idea at that time, what I was looking at. I'd never been to prison before. I was just in the county jail for 6 weeks before I bonded out. And, but it really felt like somebody just hit me in the chest with a hammer or something. And, I just went home and was just kind of depressed for the next couple months and knew what was coming. And that's honestly the best way to put it. It just felt like the wind had been knocked out of me.
Okay, so the judge is sentencing you to 20 years. You're out in 10. It's a long time. At this point, 19-year-old kid, it's really easy to turn into a victim at that point. So are you looking for someone to blame in this situation? Parents, bad upbringing, it was the drugs? Or are you just stepping up and saying, hey, look, this is what I did. I got to do the time, and that's that?
Did try to make excuses. I remember trying to tell, my lawyer that, sometimes I felt like I was possessed. And looking back, that was just immaturity and me not taking responsibility for my actions and, trying to find something that I could tell a judge or DA to not let me go to prison or to give me less time. But that never happened. And I had to go January 26, 1999 to stand before the judge and receive that sentence. And the girl that was involved with the crime, she received a similar sentence just with the lesser charge. She had a robbery as opposed to an armed robbery. But at that time, it was a 90% charge. She was going to serve 9 years. Now, I did end up helping her get out 4 years early. She only served 5. But, the judge, he made the comment that was the most time that he had ever sentenced a 16-year-old, to. It was 20, he served 10. That was the most time he'd ever given a 16-year-old at that time. And maybe to this day it still is. And that was really a harsh sentence for her. And I think that maybe 5 years would have been fair for what I did, and not so much as 10. But you can't change things. You can't turn back the hand of time. And I do know sometimes it just takes a period of time of growing before you can achieve some big things. You've got to grow into that position of leadership or of just credibility. But that's not to say that no one can do that. Anyone can grow if they're just willing to work hard. I was on the sidelines of life for 10 years growing, watching life go by, and then I got my chance. So, there's some people now who, would you be willing to wait 10 years to start making money like that, If you're not willing to wait, then you'll never get it. You just may not be in a position to be able to create those things just yet. You have to start with the penny and flip it, and it may take 10 years to get to where you make that huge 6-figure or 7-figure income. But if you don't start now, you'll never get it. But I don't think I felt like my life was over. I began to think positively, and I felt like I can go to school, I can get a degree, I can learn something. So right away, I began to look for whatever I could do to make that experience worthwhile, learning Spanish or working with youth or working my college degree. I got a GED in the county jail. I started going to college when I was in prison. So I didn't so much just feel my life was over, but I knew I had a long, long road ahead, and I was in denial about how much time I would spend there and the amount of time that I had. At 19 years old, 10 years is over 50% of your life. So when I'd come out of prison, I had spent over a third of my life in prison at 29. And so even at this point, I've still spent a significant amount of my life has been spent behind bars, even at 32. But that just goes to show you. When I tell my story, that all the excuses leave the table. For anyone, whether you're a business owner, or if you're a networker, or if you whatever you are, whatever you're trying to accomplish. If I can spend that much time in prison and can come home and can do something, then anyone can do that. It doesn't matter. I mean, anyone can do it. So.
Wes, and listening to your story, I think what's interesting to me is that you were able to make a shift while you were in an environment which is mostly negative, and you weren't exactly like that going in. I mean, prior to going in, you're quitting school, involved with drugs, doing robberies. You're not exactly on the path of someone who says, look, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. What do you think was responsible for that shift, and how you were able to change your life, get it back on the right track?
I mean, definitely, I was not myself at 17 and 18 years of old. In just a 3 or 4 year period, I had really, jumped into the deep end of the criminal pool and developed a very negative mindset that enabled me to go make decisions to rob stores and to sell drugs. But for everything from the people that I hung around, to the music I listened to the drugs that the movies I watched, it all influenced me to be able to make those decisions, to step off the edge. And I'm just so reminded of that when I see young people today. And when I see the way they dress or with the music they listen to, they're emulating something. They're emulating what they're seeing around them, and that's what they think is cool. That's what I thought. I thought my actions would make me cool, or give me money and give me power and things. But when I got incarcerated and I got sober, basically what happened, I got the drugs out of my system and I got sober. That's when I kind of came back to myself, and I just saw, what have I done? Oh my gosh! I mean, and so from that point, with that sober mindset. And I think, too, is being young was such a key. Not that someone who's 40 years old and has lived a criminal life or their entire life could change. They can change. But I think that was key, too, is I was so young that I hadn't done so much damage to myself. And because I do think, sometimes people have just done so much damage to themselves with drugs or alcohol, they could never, ever be in a position to do big things. And that's unfortunate, but that is also a consequence of living your life that way for 40 or 50 or 60 years, making horrible decisions and wreaking havoc on your brain and your body. You just can't recover that back. So I think being young, had a big impact. I hadn't done too much damage to myself, mentally and physically, and I was able to bounce back. And right away, I saw that I was going to need to educate myself. And that also brings into play, one of my strong suits, which was developed during that time, which is I'll show you all that I'm not a loser and that I'm not an ex-con and I can do significant things. And I think that played a part in me striving so hard for success. So that just comes back to having a burning desire. But, that's one of my strong suits is I'm just driven. And just, knowing that I did not want to be in prison the rest of my life. And I knew that if I didn't change something, I would, because I was smart enough to look around me and see the people who had been in here all their lives, in and out, in and out, in and out, because they weren't changing. And so I knew that I had a big sentence. And if I did change it, I could not come back. But if I stayed negative and stayed like these other guys and, we're getting fights every day or to stab people or get involved in drugs and illegal activity, that I would serve the rest of my life in and out of prison, and that was just something I wasn't going to have happen.
Right. So you have a lot of people out here right now. They've been having a tough time with life. They may have been laid off or they can't find a job. What do you think is the key to turning everything around and getting inspired again and getting motivated to make some things happen?
I think it's a dream. You've got to have a dream if you want to accomplish something, even the smallest goal. You got to have something that you're striving for. So if you've got a puzzle and you throw all the puzzle pieces on the table, if you don't have the cover of the box to look at, you're not going to know how to put that thing together. So you've got to have something driving you. So initially, I didn't have so much of a picture. I mean, I knew I wanted to be financially free. I wanted success, but I was just so driven to get to the point where I could drive nice vehicles, have a nice home, have financial independence. And so that was what kind of drove me initially. I didn't have a real dream mapped out, but I did always want to. I had the thought that I could own a camp one day, but I always thought that could be maybe 10 or 15 years after I get out of prison. But now I'm learning that I could probably do this in the next 5 or 6 or 7 years, that my wife and I could accomplish this. I mean, I just talked to so many people in the different business I'm involved in, and I see so many people who are just lost. They're just completely lost. They almost look like a deer, caught in the lights, or a deflated balloon. They just have no self-esteem. They just have no, drive. And it's just the way they've been living their life, their entire life. They've just been living their life with no purpose a leaf in the stream and with a dream. The older they've gotten, they don't even think about a dream. They don't even think about being financially free or starting a nonprofit or doing something for some type of purpose. I mean, maybe it's the average person, doesn't just have a regular job and they're fine with that. And if they're okay with that, that's great. But still, I meet so many people who even just work a regular 9 to 5, but they have no purpose. They're not doing anything positive to really give a sense of purpose in their life, and there's just no dream there. And so I think that's the key. And anyone can do it. Anyone can grow, and anyone can learn. But it does take a dream. If you're so fearful of taking a step and risking failure or risking looking foolish, you'll never make it happen. You got to get over that. And you just look at babies. I mean, they don't care when they fall down, or they sound so foolish for the first 2-3 of their years of their life. But that's how you learn to talk. You'll never learn a second language unless you go through that period of sounding foolish and making mistakes and saying crazy things that come out wrong. And so you have to go through that process of making mistakes and learning and getting better. And so that's just what it comes down to. You got to take action, just have that dream, have a dream that's bigger than your fear, and action. Just take action daily, and keep moving yourself forward towards whatever it is that you want in your life.
Good stuff. A lot of good information, man. In closing, is there anything that we didn't get a chance to talk about or something that maybe you wanted to leave everyone with?
I would just finally I guess, and wrap it up, say that, just live your life daily in the now, not thinking about tomorrow or not dwelling on the past, but just knowing that all we have is right now. The past doesn't even exist. The future doesn't even exist. You can't hold that in your hand. That's not physical. And that's really the ultimate test for what's real. So all we have is right now. So use your nows to your advantage. And as long as you're doing that, you're doing positive things, you're moving forward, you're doing those things every day, your life will get better, it will grow, it will compound, and you'll get whatever you want from your relationships, from your finances, from your spirituality. Everything that you could possibly want, you will get it. It's just a matter of time. But you have to work daily, and you have to take advantage of every moment that you have.
I like that. Don't get too caught up in the past and don't worry about what's coming in the future. Just figure out how to get things done right now. That's big. Look, I appreciate you coming on the show, and I wish you much continued success. Looking forward to seeing you continue to do big things.
All right, sounds good. We'll be in touch, Will.